Master Observer Gray's hands shook as he stared at the readings on his screen. He blinked his large, silver eyes several times, but the data remained the same. After 30 years of planetary surveys, he had never seen anything like this. "Shipmaster," he called out, his voice trembling. "You need to see this." The shipmaster walked over, his protective suit making soft whirring sounds with each step. The entire survey vessel maintained conditions that most civilized species found comfortable: cool, low gravity, and minimal radiation. Outside their ship, the planet they orbited was anything but comfortable. "What have you found?" the shipmaster asked, leaning over Gray's shoulder. "Life signs," Gray whispered. "But that's impossible. This is a death world Class 12. The shipmaster's breathing quickened. Every student of planetary science knew the classification system. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets, perfect for settlement. Class 5 worlds needed some terraforming but were manageable. Class 8 worlds were considered dangerous and required special equipment to visit. Class 12. Those were death traps. Planets so hostile that even automated equipment had trouble surviving. "Show me the data," the shipmaster ordered. Gray pulled up the readings. The planet below them, third from its sun, was a nightmare by galactic standards. Its gravity was crushing, nearly twice what most species could tolerate. The atmosphere was thick with oxygen, a highly reactive and dangerous gas. Temperature swings of over 40 degrees were common, and the surface was battered by storms that dropped acid water from the sky. But that wasn't the worst part. The planet teemed with aggressive life forms, massive creatures that ate each other, tiny organisms that could kill with a single bite, plants that actively defended themselves with poison. "Look at this," Gray pointed to a particular reading. "Radio signals, complex ones, thousands of them, coming from all over the planet's surface." The shipmaster gripped the back of Gray's chair. "Natural phenomenon." "No." Gray pulled up more data. "They're artificial. There's a pattern. Look, there are structures down there. Cities, roads. They've even sent primitive vehicles into orbit." "Impossible," the shipmaster whispered. "Nothing could evolve intelligence in those conditions. The radiation alone." Gray zoomed in on one of the cities. The image showed tall buildings, vehicles moving in organized patterns, and most shockingly, beings walking around in the open air. No protective suits, no environmental shields. They were just living there. "They're called humans," Gray said, pulling up the preliminary data his sensors had gathered. "And this isn't just their colony world. This is where they evolved. They call it Earth." The shipmaster stepped back, his protective suit whirring louder as its systems compensated for his increased stress. "Send an emergency signal to the Council. Highest priority." "Already done," Gray confirmed. "But there's more." He pointed to another set of readings. "They're advancing quickly. These signals here, they're working on faster-than-light travel theories. They've already sent primitive craft to their moon and the next planet out. They're going to achieve galactic travel capabilities soon." The shipmaster stared at the beautiful but deadly blue-green world below them. From up here, it looked peaceful, but the readings told the truth. It was a world that would kill most galactic citizens in minutes. And its people were about to join galactic society. "How?" the shipmaster asked, more to himself than Gray. "How did they survive there? How did they build a civilization in conditions that would kill any normal species?" Gray looked up at his commander, his silver eyes wide with wonder and fear. What if they don't know they're not normal? What if to them, we're the strange ones? The shipmaster turned away from the viewport, his movements stiff. "Continue monitoring. Record everything. The Council will need all the data we can gather." He paused at the door. "And Gray, mark this planet as an extreme hazard, not because of the conditions, but because of what kind of species it must take to consider this hell their home." As the shipmaster left, Gray turned back to his screens, watching the beings called humans go about their daily lives on their lethal world, completely unaware that they had just terrified the galaxy's greatest minds. Senior researcher Blue couldn't believe what she was watching through the observation drone's feed. Her team had been monitoring human behavior for 3 standard weeks now, and each day brought new horrors. "They're doing it again," her assistant called out. "The morning ritual." Blue turned her attention to the main screen. A group of humans was moving at high speed along a paved path. They were breathing heavily, their bodies covered in their own secretions as they willingly exercised in the crushing gravity. "They call it jogging," Blue noted in her report. "They do this for entertainment." The observation post, hidden in orbit using the latest cloaking technology, had been carefully chosen to monitor a typical human settlement called a suburb. The council wanted to understand how these creatures lived in such hostile conditions. "New feed coming in," another assistant announced, from their food preparation area. Blue switched screens and immediately flinched. A human was deliberately adding capsaicin compounds, literal chemical irritants, to their food. These same compounds were used as defensive weapons by some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Yet here was a human, casually sprinkling it on their meal while humming a tune. "Mark that as another example of their poison resistance," Blue said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And update the threat assessment." The threat assessment was already longer than any Blue had ever written. Humans didn't just survive their death world. They seemed to enjoy its most dangerous aspects. They went outside during acid rainstorms, carrying small protective shields they called umbrellas, as if that was perfectly normal. They visited areas of extreme temperature for a vacation. They even kept predator species in their homes as pets. Senior researcher called out the weather monitor. "There's a major temperature shift coming." Blue watched as the temperature in the observation zone dropped 15 degrees in a single planetary rotation. The humans simply added layers of insulation they called clothes and continued their activities. A few small humans even went outside to play in the frozen acid water that fell from the sky. "Update from the cultural team," her assistant said. "They've been analyzing their entertainment broadcasts. The humans make up stories about meeting aliens." Blue brought up the cultural report on her screen. As she read, her eyes widened. They think they're the weak ones. Their stories are about aliens being stronger and more advanced than them. She leaned back in her chair, trying to process this information. These creatures, who could survive radiation levels that would kill most species, who ate poison for pleasure, who treated extreme gravity as normal. They imagined themselves as the physically inferior species. "New activity in Zone 3, the observation officer reported. Blue switched feeds again. A group of humans was responding to a dangerous situation. A fire had broken out in one of their dwellings. Instead of evacuating the area, as any sensible species would, human emergency workers ran into the burning building. They moved through heat that would kill most galactic species, carrying out others who had been trapped. Their protective gear shouldn't be able to handle those temperatures, Blue's assistant noted. "Those aren't environmental suits," Blue replied quietly. "They're just wearing thick clothes and carrying oxygen tanks." The room fell silent as they watched the humans battle the fire. Not a single one died, despite conditions that should have been lethal. After it was over, the emergency workers simply got back in their vehicles, ready to do it all again if needed. Blue started her daily report to the council with shaking hands. How could she make them understand what they were seeing? These humans weren't just surviving on a death world. They had mastered it so completely that they didn't even realize how incredible they were. "Correction to previous threat assessments," she wrote. "The true danger is not that these humans have survived their environment. The true danger is that they have no idea how strong they actually are." Council Leader White paced back and forth in the great chamber, his protective suit struggling to keep up with his agitated movements. Around him, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was in complete chaos, something that hadn't happened in over 300 years. "Order," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We must maintain order." The chamber slowly quieted. 200 representatives from across the galaxy turned their attention to the central platform. The massive screens behind White showed images of Earth and its inhabitants, along with their latest achievement, a successful test of their first faster-than-light engine prototype. The humans have broken the light barrier, White announced, though everyone had already seen the data. Their entry into galactic society is no longer a distant concern. It is now an immediate crisis. Master Observer Gray stepped forward, his silver eyes reflecting the blue glow of the data screens. "If I may speak, Council Leader." White nodded. At least Gray had actually seen these humans up close. "The humans' achievement is remarkable," Gray began, "but perhaps we are overreacting. They show no signs of aggressive intent." "No signs," a representative interrupted. "They live on a death world. They eat poison. They punch each other for sport." Another representative stood up. "I've reviewed their entertainment broadcasts. They constantly imagine wars with alien species. They're preparing for conflict." Gray tried to speak again, but more voices joined the chaos. "Their bodies can withstand radiation that would kill us. They sleep through dangerous temperature changes. They can break bones and just heal them. They let their young play with predator species." White raised his hands for silence. "We have all seen Senior Researcher Blue's reports. These humans are unlike anything we have encountered before. But now, look at this." He gestured, and new images appeared on the screens. They showed human space stations, moon bases, and their Mars colony under construction. "They are expanding," White continued. "They took a planet we classified as uninhabitable, and they're building homes on it. They call it challenging, but manageable." The chamber erupted in fearful whispers. Everyone knew Mars was a frozen wasteland with a toxic atmosphere and deadly radiation levels. To humans, it was just another engineering problem to solve. "What do you propose?" asked the Trade Minister, her environmental suit glowing softly in the dim chamber. White took a deep breath. "We must act now, before they fully master faster-than-light travel. We must contain them." "Contain them." Gray stepped forward again. "With all due respect, Council Leader, how?" "They survive conditions that would kill our strongest warriors. They build bases in environments that destroy our best equipment. What exactly do you think could contain them?" "Laws," White replied. "Regulations. We make first contact now, while we can still set the rules. We establish safety protocols that just happen to limit their expansion. For their own protection, of course." The chamber grew quiet as they considered this. "And if they refuse?" someone asked. White turned to stare at the image of Earth spinning slowly on the main screen. "They believe in laws, in rules. Their own entertainment shows them constantly fighting against rule breakers. We use that. We make them think these restrictions are for everyone's safety, including their own." Gray watched the council members nodding in agreement. Only he had been close enough to Earth to see something they were all missing. In every human story about being restricted, about being contained, about being held back by rules and regulations, the humans always broke free. But before he could voice this concern, the council voted. The motion passed almost unanimously. They would make first contact with humanity, not with open arms, but with chains disguised as safety protocols. As the chamber emptied, Gray stayed behind, staring at the images of Earth. He wondered if the council truly understood what they were doing. They weren't containing a threat. They were challenging humanity to break free. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was overcoming challenges. Ambassador Green stood before the mirror, checking his environmental suit for the 100th time. Everything had to be perfect for humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. The suit was the most advanced model available, designed to protect him from Earth's crushing gravity, toxic oxygen levels, and deadly radiation. "Final systems check complete," his assistant reported. "The suit will keep you alive for up to 6 hours in Earth conditions." Green nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. The Council had chosen him for this mission because of his diplomatic experience, but nothing in his career had prepared him for meeting beings who considered a death world comfortable. The landing site had been carefully selected, a place humans called Geneva. The local authorities had been contacted through remote messages, and they had agreed to a controlled meeting environment. At least these humans understood basic diplomatic protocols. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, Green watched the readings climb to terrifying levels. The ship's shields handled the conditions easily, but just knowing what was out there made him uncomfortable. Landing complete, the pilot announced. External conditions are stable, if you can call them that. Green took a deep breath of his filtered air. Open the doors. Let's make history. The human delegation waited outside. Green had studied their appearance, but seeing them in person was different. They stood naturally in the brutal gravity, their bodies entirely exposed to the toxic atmosphere. Some even had their heads uncovered, letting the deadly solar radiation touch their skin. "Welcome to Earth," one of them stepped forward, smiling. Green's translator rendered the words perfectly. "I'm the Secretary General of the United Nations." Green moved carefully in his suit, very aware of the lethal conditions surrounding him. "Greetings. I am Ambassador Green of the Galactic Council. We come in peace and with great interest in your world." The meeting proceeded better than expected. The humans were polite, curious, and showed no signs of the aggressive behavior the Council feared. They asked intelligent questions about galactic society and seemed excited about joining the larger community. Then everything went wrong. Green's suit gave a sudden warning beep. He glanced at his readings and felt his heart stop. The gravity compensators were failing. "Is everything all right?" the Secretary General asked, noticing his distress. "My suit," Green managed to say as the crushing weight of Earth's gravity began to press down on him. Malfunction. What happened next would change galactic society forever. Instead of backing away from the failing suit, which might explode or release toxic gases, the humans rushed forward. They moved with incredible speed and strength, catching Green as his legs gave out under Earth's gravity. "Medical team," the Secretary General shouted. But the humans didn't wait. Working together, they quickly identified the suit's problems. Their engineers, operating in what should have been lethal conditions, had Green's suit stabilized in minutes. One of them even held him up with one arm while working on the suit's systems with their other hand, showing casual strength that would have required powered armor for most species. "There," one of the engineers said. "That should hold until you can get back to your ship. The gravity compensators were overheating. We redirected the power flow." Green stood there, supported by beings who could survive conditions that had nearly killed him in seconds. But instead of using their strength to threaten or dominate, they had helped without hesitation. Back on his ship, Green wrote his report to the Council with shaking hands. The Council needed to know the truth about humans. Yes, they were incredibly strong and resilient by galactic standards. But more importantly, their first instinct upon seeing a stranger in danger was to help. "Recommendation," he wrote. "Abandon containment plans. These humans don't need to be restricted. They need to be understood. They are not just survivors of a death world. They are protectors who have mastered their harsh environment, not to dominate, but to help others." He attached the video of his rescue, knowing it would shock the Council. Let them see the truth. Humanity's strength wasn't what made them special. It was how they chose to use it. Captain Smith stood at the viewport of humanity's first faster-than-light ship, the Explorer, staring at what the Galactic database called a garden world. Behind him, his crew whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "This can't be right," his science officer said, checking the readings again. "The atmosphere is too thin. The gravity is barely 40% of Earth's. The radiation shielding from their magnetic field it's like tissue paper compared to Earth's." "But the database clearly shows this is one of the most populated worlds in the galaxy," Smith replied, watching the gleaming cities below. Over 3 billion people live here. The explorer had been invited to visit this world as part of humanity's introduction to galactic society. The crew had expected to need special equipment to handle a more advanced world. Instead, they were all wearing gravity boosters to avoid accidentally jumping 30 feet in the air. "Captain," the communication officer called out. "Message from the surface. They're asking if our environmental suits are ready for landing." Smith looked down at his regular uniform and tried not to laugh. "Tell them we're fine, though we might need some weights to keep us from bouncing around in their gravity." The revelation had been building over the past week as they visited different worlds. What humans considered normal, the galaxy considered extreme. What they thought of as pleasant conditions were terrifying to most species. Their landing party caused quite a stir. The local officials stayed behind thick environmental barriers, wearing protective suits. They watched in horror as the humans walked casually in conditions that would have killed most galactic species. "Your strength is remarkable," one official said through a speaker. "To move so easily in these conditions." Smith was about to explain that they actually needed help to move normally in such low gravity when an urgent message came through from Earth. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "you need to see this. The Galactic Council just found out about our Mars base." The local officials crowded around their screens as images of the Mars colony appeared. To Smith and his crew, it was a normal sight. The domed cities, the terraforming projects, the mining operations. But the aliens reacted as if they were watching a horror show. You built cities on that death world." One official stammered. "We classified Mars as uninhabitable. The radiation alone." "Oh, the radiation's not great," Smith admitted. "That's why we built the shields. The real challenge is the dust storms, but we figured out some good filtration systems." The silence that followed was deafening. "Captain," another official said slowly, "what exactly does humanity consider a challenging environment?" Smith thought for a moment. "Well, Venus is pretty tough. We're still working on how to build anything permanent on the surface. The pressure and heat keep crushing our equipment. Give us a few years, though. We've got some good ideas about floating cities in the upper atmosphere." The officials stared at him. One of them actually backed away. That evening, in his private quarters, Smith read through the Galactic database with new understanding. Everything clicked into place. Why the aliens always wore protective suits, why they treated humans with such caution, why they kept talking about safety protocols. A message from Earth's government popped up on his screen. They had just received the full galactic classification of habitable worlds. Earth wasn't just at the bottom of the list. It was classified as a death world so extreme that evolution of intelligent life there had been considered impossible. "Well," Smith said to himself, looking out at the alien city below, "I guess this explains why they were so surprised by the mountain climbing videos we showed them at the welcome dinner." He began drafting a report to Earth. Humanity wasn't weak or behind as they'd feared. They were basically the galaxy's heavyweight champions, living on a world that would kill most species in minutes. And they had done it so naturally. They never even realized how strong they were. The emergency alarms in the Galactic Council chamber wouldn't stop ringing. Council Leader White stared at the disaster reports flooding in from the Centauri sector. 3 colonies were facing complete destruction from an unexpected solar flare. Their sun had become unstable, bombarding the worlds with radiation levels that made evacuation impossible. "No rescue ships can approach," the emergency director reported. "The radiation levels are too high. They'll fry any ship's crew before they can reach the colonies." White felt the weight of 10 million lives on his shoulders. The colonists had less than 48 hours before the next, stronger flare would hit. Their shields wouldn't survive it. Then Master Observer Gray burst into the chamber. "The humans," he said, breathing hard. "They're already on their way." "What?" White turned to the main screen. Sure enough, 5 human ships were heading toward the Centauri sector at full speed. "Stop them. They don't understand the danger." "No," Gray said firmly. They understand perfectly. They just don't care. Look. The screen showed the interior of the lead human ship. The crew wasn't in environmental suits. Instead, they wore simple radiation gear that would be laughably inadequate by galactic standards. "This is Captain Smith of the Earth ship, Explorer," a transmission came through. "We've reviewed the situation. Our ships can handle the radiation. We're going in." The Council watched in horror as the human ships approached the danger zone. The radiation levels were now high enough to kill most species in seconds. Receiving transmission from Earth, the communications officer announced. They're sending more ships. They've called for volunteers for a rescue mission." "How many volunteered?" White asked. "All of them," the officer replied quietly. "They had to turn people away." The next hours became legend in galactic history. The human ships didn't just survive the radiation. They thrived in it. Their crews worked tirelessly in conditions that would have killed any other species, evacuating colonists to safety. When a station's power failed, 2 humans went outside their ship to fix it. They worked in space, exposed to direct radiation, protected only by what they called standard EVA suits. They finished the repairs while telling jokes to each other over the radio. When a colony's shield started to collapse, the humans didn't retreat. They landed and helped carry people to the ships, walking through radiation storms that melted their equipment but left them merely sunburned. "How?" White whispered, watching the rescue footage. "How are they doing this?" Gray smiled. "They grew up on a world that tries to kill them every day. To them, this is just another Tuesday." The footage spread across the galaxy. Billions watched as humans walked through radiation to save children, carried injured aliens twice their size to safety, and risked their lives again and again without hesitation. One clip went viral. A human rescue worker giving their radiation suit to an injured colonist and continuing to work without it, saying simply, "I'll be fine. I got worse sunburns at the beach last summer." In the council chamber, the emergency director approached White with a new problem. "The containment regulations," she said. "The humans broke 17 different safety protocols during the rescue. By law, we should punish them." White looked at the casualty reports. Without the humans, 10 million would have died. With them, the death toll was 0. "No," he said firmly, "we're not punishing anyone." "But the regulations." "Were wrong," White interrupted. "We tried to contain them because we were afraid of their strength. But look at how they use it." On the main screen, a human ship was flying through the heart of a radiation storm, carrying the last evacuees to safety. The radiation was so strong it was visible as a purple glow around the ship. The ship's name was clearly visible. Explorer. White smiled. They didn't just explore space. They showed us what humanity truly is. Not monsters from a death world, but heroes who would walk through hell to save a stranger. 3 months after the Centauri rescue, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The environmental barriers between species had been removed. In their place stood a simple podium, built to Earth standard gravity. Behind it, Captain Smith of the Explorer stood tall, still slightly amused by how the other species viewed humans with a mixture of fear and awe. The creation of the Emergency Response and Hazardous Environment Division is now complete, Smith announced to the gathered representatives. Earth has committed 30 ships and 10,000 personnel for immediate deployment. Council Leader White nodded from his seat. He still wore his environmental suit, but the fear in his eyes was gone. "And the training program?" "Already underway," Smith replied. "We're teaching other species how to operate in what they consider extreme conditions. Turns out, with the right equipment and training, many of them can handle more than they thought." The chamber buzzed with excited conversation. In just 3 months, humanity had transformed from a potential threat into the galaxy's greatest asset. Their ships now patrolled the most dangerous regions of space. Their scientists explored worlds others couldn't visit. Their engineers built safety systems that could withstand almost anything. "There's more," Smith continued. The Mars colony has agreed to host the galaxy's first extreme environment training center. Any species wanting to learn survival skills is welcome. A representative raised her hand. But Mars is a death world. How can we possibly train there? Smith tried not to smile. We've built special facilities that can simulate different gravity levels and atmospheric conditions. We'll start you in what you consider normal and work up from there. Baby steps. And Earth. Another representative asked, will you host visitors there as well? Eventually, Smith nodded. We're building special visitor centers with reduced gravity and radiation shielding. Think of Earth as the graduate school of survival training. The chamber laughed. Something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. The same abilities that had made humans seem threatening now made them the perfect teachers and protectors. Master Observer Gray stepped forward. Captain, tell them about the new ship class. Smith's eyes lit up. Yes. We're introducing what we call the Universe-class ships. Built to Earth standards, but with adjustable environmental systems. The crew areas can switch between different gravity levels and atmospheric conditions. This means mixed crews, humans working alongside other species, each in their comfort zone. White stood up. I remember when we first discovered Earth. We called it a death world and feared its people. He looked around the chamber. We were wrong. Earth isn't a death world. It's a training ground. It forged humanity into exactly what the galaxy needed. Beings strong enough to help others, brave enough to face any challenge, and kind enough to use their strength for the good of all. The chamber erupted in applause. Even species that had once voted to contain humanity now celebrated their presence. After the session, Smith walked with Gray through the Council's garden dome. Through the windows, they could see Earth ships coming and going, their hulls marked with the new symbol of the Emergency Response Division, a human hand reaching out to the stars. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? Gray asked. Smith watched a training session in progress, where a human instructor was teaching other species how to operate in higher gravity. The students were struggling but determined, inspired by their teacher's example. Actually, I did, Smith replied. Not the details, but the general idea. Humans have always been at their best when helping others. We just needed the chance to prove it. The galaxy feared you would be conquerors, Gray observed. Smith shook his head. We never wanted to conquer the galaxy. We just wanted to explore it, to understand it, to be part of it. And now we are, not as monsters from a death world, but as protectors, teachers, and friends. Above them, another Earth ship launched, carrying a mixed crew of humans and aliens. They were headed to a system where others feared to go, ready to help anyone in need. It wasn't about being strong anymore. It was about being strong enough to help others become stronger.